The world is changed.
I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. I smell it in the air. Much that once was is lost, for none now live who remember it.
Welcome back to Boy Party's 25 for 25, where I count down the 25 best films of the century so far. We've reached the top 5 of the list. It's the best blockbuster of the century, and in my opinion, the best blockbuster project of all time. It's Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy. Now, I'm slightly cheating here. I'm doing 3 movies for the value of 1. I'm aware of that, but I don't think you can really split these movies out into 3 if you're making a ranking. I think it would do a disservice to the entire project that Jackson endeavored, which was completed as one production. It was shot back to back. It was, done in post. It was released 3 consecutive Christmases. These movies fit together so perfectly as one long, big, epic endeavor. I don't think that splitting them out into which one's the best, which one's the worst, does them any good. And I don't think that including one of the 3 on this list without including the others would make much sense. The only time I ever really pick one over the others is when I'm making a list on Letterboxd, where you have to, select one film to, be on the list, because it's, you have to go through a list and click on one. And I always pick The Two Towers because I think The Two Towers is the best. I know people who feel the first is the best. I know people who feel the third is the best. I'm a Two Towers head. I think it's got the best start to finish momentum, incredible action all the way through, introduces great new characters, new threads, doesn't have to do all the setup of the first one, and I have nothing bad to say about Return of the King, but I think The Two Towers just is a bit more efficiently told, maybe moves a bit brisker, but they're all fantastic 5-star films, so I won't say anything to suggest that I don't love them all equally, because I do. So these are interesting movies because Peter Jackson is now our number 5 filmmaker on this list, right? He's up there with the top brass. And Peter Jackson is not necessarily a filmmaker I would call myself a fan of beyond these films. I haven't seen his early kind of, exploitation movies, bad taste or whatever. Haven't seen that. I've seen Heavenly Creatures. I think it's fine. And of course I've seen everything that came after this, which I can't say much positive things about. I think King Kong is alright. I liked it a lot when I was younger. Haven't gone back to it recently because like Return of the King, it features large and scary spiders. I think The Lovely Bones is absolutely one of the worst films I've ever seen. I think it is an absolute catastrophically misjudged movie that does such a disservice to Saoirse Ronan as its lead and to the author whose novel it was based on, although I don't think the novel's very good either, but there you go. And then, since then, he's directed 3 more movies, and those are the Hobbit movies, and they are kind of famously shit, right? And they're extra shit because they were piggybacking on the success of these movies, and they were, of course, a prequel to Lord of the Rings, originally intended to be directed by Guillermo del Toro. He drops out, Peter Jackson is brought back in, and you can just feel Jackson's lack of enthusiasm. His lack of investment in the story, his lack of investment in the characters, and instead he puts all his energy into kind of poor quality CGI experimentation, and absolutely all of the tactile, beautiful, practical stuff that makes the Lord of the Rings trilogy so special, the makeup, the sets, the use of landscapes, is swapped out for artificiality and orcs that are in these movies, stuntmen with amazing prosthetics. In The Hobbit, they are fully CGI. And it is shocking how someone could go back to a world that they did such amazing work in 10 years before and have such poor outcome. And you've got Gandalf back in the movies. Ian McKellen is there. Legolas is there. Galadriel is there. A lot of these beloved characters came back for those movies. And I'm not even gonna, you can't even blame Martin Freeman as the lead as Bilbo. I think he's quite good. Richard Armitage as the main dwarf, I won't be as positive about him, but I don't know. look, I could talk about the Hobbit movies all day. Ultimately, they have, I think, retroactively made the Lord of the Rings movies even more special, because you look back now and you realize, well, these could only have been made at a very specific moment in time, right? Because even the guy who made them would develop really bad instincts a few years down the line. So it's like, okay, Peter Jackson had one crack at Lord of the Rings, and he made these movies in a window where there was enough CGI in the world to make cool stuff like the Balrog and Shelob and, all of these incredible, fantastical creatures and elements in these movies that look so amazing. But it wasn't quite good or affordable enough to make everything that way. And they had to do practical this, practical that. And as a result, these movies are incredibly special. And I think the best version of this kind of thing that's ever been done. I don't think there's any fantasy blockbuster that comes close. And we witnessed a decade in the wake of these movies of people trying to copy them. And you had, obviously, running concurrent to these, the Harry Potter franchise, which is kind of its own thing, because they did start just before these movies did. I think those movies are excellent. A few of them are great. They're kind of off in their own space. But then you have this sort of Narnia thing, and you have all Aragon, all of these movies with dragons and wizards and fantasy worlds that came out. And it was painful as a child growing up in the 2000s to have just missed the window on seeing Lord of the Rings in the cinema, and then to be served up post Lord of the Rings copycat slop for the next decade and a half. And I would include the Hobbit movies in that. And the Hobbit movies, I think, mark the end of that. And after the Hobbit movies, everyone stops trying to make Lord of the Rings again, and everybody starts trying to make, superhero movies. So it's different. But my relationship with these films when they were coming out is that my dad was going to see them because he loved the books, and he's a big Tolkien fan for life. And he went to see these as they were released. And then I was 4, 5, and 6 when these movies were released, right? So, if even, I would have been 4 in 2001. And my dad was just like telling me about these movies as they were coming out. He was telling me every single memorable moment from them after he came home from seeing them. And this was a really kind of magical way to experience Lord of the Rings secondhand. In hindsight, I probably could have just read the books with him, but I don't think we had them in the house at the time. I was reading books maybe aimed a bit younger then, but I thought it sounded incredible. He was telling me about the scene with Gandalf and the Balrog.
Shadow. You shall not pass!
And he was telling me about the fact that this guy called Strider appears in a pub, and then he turns out to be this legendary warrior called Aragorn. And then a year later, about this incredible battle at Minas Tirith, and then the fact that the king has this, whispering kind of goblin fucking worm tongue in his ear, and then he's freed from this control, and then another year later, the I am no woman, I am no man, whatever it is, with Eowyn, and then the spider, which I've never actually watched that sequence in Return of the King because I'm a massive arachnophobe, as many of you will know. And I was just taking this all in, like, wow, this sounds incredible. And I think the version of it I built up in my head was something really extraordinary. And then when I ultimately watched these movies, it fully lived up to that. Like, they are just as good, if not better, than the absolute maximum cool, epic version of them that I could create in my head as a child. And that is so unusual, Normally, things based on fantasy books are very hard to make as magical on the screen as they are on the page. And having, to this day, not read Tolkien's novels, which I will admit, I think that these movies pull that off, where it's like just the imagination of the author and of the reader is fully transposed onto the cinema screen. And it's really remarkable. And I was into I was like a Lord of the Rings fan before I even saw these. I had a poster of Aragorn on my wall, and I had a Legolas Legolas costume as a Christmas present in 2003, 2004. And I hadn't watched the movies yet, but I was like, oh my God, there's this elf warrior who has long hair, and I was like a little boy with long blonde hair, and I was looking for role models. Legolas, pretty fucking sick role model if you're a little boy with long blonde hair. He's got a bow and arrow and shit. He's class. So I was like a big Lord of the Rings fan, and only then did I actually sit down and watch the movies. Which weirdly, I don't think was a big event. I think it was just like, oh, they were on Channel 4 on a Saturday night, consecutive Saturdays, and I watched them, and I was like, oh, these are fucking class. But I've obviously revisited them many times over the years. I don't really indulge in the marathon the way that some people do. I've never sat down and watched all 3 extended editions back to back. I think the most I've done is I've watched all 3 in the space of about a week. I brought Shane Kelly of the podcast to see Fellowship extended edition in the Lighthouse in 2018. He had never engaged with this franchise at all. He isn't into fantasy. Like, he was never got into fantasy as a child. I think probably a moderate, I don't want to speak for him, a moderate interest in Harry Potter, but nothing beyond that. He'd never seen a Star Wars film until a couple of years ago. And he wasn't into it. And I was like, yeah, this is kind of a tough nut to crack. Like, if you're 22 and you've never engaged with Tolkien or Lord of the Rings, and you're suddenly sat down to watch it, it is so earnest and it requires such an insanely high buy-in of like suspension of disbelief. Like, not in a bad way or in like a, oh man, it's, you know, so hard to get into way, but it just like, the rules of Lord of the Rings are pretty dense. It's set in an alternate world, but it's not in space. It's just like over there. It's Middle Earth. And there's all these different creatures that just exist. But like, I just knew this stuff when I was 4 or 5 years old. So to me, it doesn't feel like something I've ever had to learn. It's not lore I've had to learn. Whereas like when I sat down to watch Game of Thrones, I had to learn the lore of like, why do these people live alongside these people? I feel like I've always existed in Lord of the Rings brain. But for someone like Shane who hadn't, I did get that it was hard to suddenly embrace this franchise and to buy into the vibes of it. And the vibes of it are magnificent. They're so specific. It starts with Cate Blanchett's voice speaking in Elvish, and it just kind of goes on like that. Like, there's not a slightest hint of cynicism or skepticism or, you know, any of this eye rolling that you get, even in Star Wars and Star Trek sometimes. I think that this world in this series is just so committed to what it's doing and to the you know, world it's presenting. There's no self-consciousness about it, and I love that so much. I shout out some of the standout performances in these movies that I think need to be mentioned. As I mentioned, Ian McKellen, Gandalf, incredible, got a Best Supporting Actor nomination for Fellowship, well deserved. Viggo Mortensen as Aragorn is unbelievable, and this is the only person you could have put in this role. Viggo Mortensen has this very specific energy of just like sincerity and warmth of at a kind of a mystical level, and I think that he is such an incredible choice for this role. He wasn't the first choice. I think, who was it? Was it? Am I right? Is it Dougray Scott or is it the other guy that misses out on this? I always get mixed up. Stuart Townsend and Dougray Scott. One of them was up for Wolverine. One of them was up for Aragorn. But whoever it was, he's no Viggo Mortensen. You've got Elijah Wood as Frodo, obviously kind of the glue at the center of this trilogy. Again, so much like sincerity in him as an actor that really, really works here. That I think Martin Freeman tries to capture again in the Hobbit movies and just can't quite manage, although he is a good actor. You've got Sean Astin, as Sam, who is great. Not an actor I have a whole lot of interest in outside of these movies, but he is really good in these. And then you've got this bench of incredible talent: Liv Tyler, Hugo Weaving, Orlando Bloom, John Rhys Davies, Miranda Otto. Like, you know, all the stars are here. It's Lord of the Rings. It's the best. And if you're not into it, you're not going to get into it. So, you know, joke's on you. Sorry you weren't there in 2001, 2003, being told by your dad what these movies are about. Of course, maybe the best performance in all these movies. Andy Serkis as Gollum. Oh my days. What an incredible piece of work between the actual technological element of the mocap and the performance that Serkis gives. Gollum as a fully rounded three-dimensional human character, despite what he looks and sounds like and what he is, which is weird beige goblin creature. It's unbelievable. I've never seen a piece of fantasy media create a character this complex and sympathetic out of something so inhuman and hideous looking. It's really remarkable.
Go away. Go away! I hate you. I hate you. Where would you be without me?
What the third movie pulls off that the other movies maybe don't have as much of is just this like really leaning into the scale and just absolutely taking its time to show us this New Zealand landscape look how incredible these cities we've built are. Look at all these sets. You've got the lighting of the beacon sequence, which is something I still watch in the morning sometimes to get myself out of bed, where the camera just pans across these amazing towers and mountains, and oh, it's extraordinary. It's like something out of The Sound of Music. And like, you've gotten to the third movie, the middle of the third movie, and you still have cool stuff to show us that's going to blow our minds. And there's also interesting filmmaking choices. There's interesting editing. There's the scene in the third movie where Pippin is singing this Mist and Shadow song, and we're cutting back and forth between John Noble's character eating his disgusting tomatoes with the juice going everywhere, and I think Faramir is riding into battle, and the horses and their sound of their hooves is mixed in with the song, and like, this is just incredible filmmaking. I mean, this is like something you'd see today and you'd be like, wow. And like, the fact that they got that into a big epic fantasy blockbuster that made $1.5 billion is really amazing.
And there are many paths to tread through shadow to the edge.
So yeah, that's the Lord of the Rings trilogy. They deserve to be on this list. Absolutely. They are the best. Thank you so much for tuning into this edition of the 25 for 25. I'll be back with number 4 on the list. We're almost there, guys. Number 4 on the list very soon. You can visit boypartypod.com for regular episodes every Tuesday. Boy Party Live is coming up next Saturday, the 22nd of November. You can still buy your tickets. And I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.